the next area we're going to discuss is a very important one. That is workflows and governance. Why is it important? Well, let's start by just a little understanding of workflows. So workflows is a repeatable process that is automated. So in this the sense that we're discussing here, why is that important? Because you really then can develop processes that are repeatable and also that can be measured, and that will allow you, in some sense, to really apply governance in areas that would be a manual process that can then turn into an automated process or really improve your program going forward. So why are workflows important? So they give you the ability to have an open community to make contributions with having a certain amount of control, and those workflows can be peer reviewed. So you can have workflows that everyone can see, improve on, and apply. They're very easy to create, maintain, and they can introduce a lot of complexity, but complexity can be simplified within the workflow. And then workflow functionality that's available. You're within Alation, you're able to make change requests, add objects, terms, etc. So this can improve both the efficiency, but also the quality of what work you're doing within Alation. So some best practices around workflows. When do we need to have a workflow? So that's, I think, a common question that anybody can ask. Really, it's around when you're working on policies, right? Any policy that want to be updated, et cetera, can have workflows. Business critical terms or critical data elements, for example, can have workflows. So when changes need to be requested or done, there's could be workflows supporting that. This also would include anything around sensitive or business critical data objects as well. When do you not want to have a workflow? So that may be just as important as when you want one, because sometimes when you get a new tool, you tend to want to use it, and you want to use it in all the areas, but you don't need to use it everywhere. And so areas around workflows that you do not want to use for are really around test data objects. Definitely not there because obviously it's test. You don't need a workflow for a test. That's definitely would run contradictory to that. You definitely don't want a workflow around objects that not requiring data stewardship. And also objects that are currently in development. Why? Because those are going to change. So there's no need to have any workflows in those areas. So a little bit around workflows with Alation, just to give you a taste right before we jump into the demo. So here's an example of where there's no workflow that's available, a workflow that is available that's been published. So here, if you have a workflow that has been published, you'll see a suggest change on the side, and a workflow where there's no workflow, for example, in this area around this table, it will tell you edit. So you'll be able to definitely create that workflow in that example when you see that edit sign. So that's a little bit around workflows. Don't forget, workflows are around efficiency. They should be used in areas that are repeatable and that allow you to improve the process, but they can't be used in all areas. So those are just some of the key points around workflows to remember. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Sean, who is going to run us through. Oops. Who's going to run us through if I can get there. So there we go. Oops. We went too far. There you go, Sean.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Salvador. Okay, so just picking up on that last slide that Salvador had shared with you just a few seconds ago, right? We were circling the two different buttons that changed based on if there's workflows applied or not to your data objects. So, right, coming back to our channel views page, right? If you were following along before, as we were jumping in throughout different pages throughout this webinar, you might have caught on to this little button change, right? You can see for this page, we actually have, instead of this edit button here, we've got the suggest change, right? If I jump onto another page, you can see the difference, right? So if I have the ability to come in and directly edit, I'm going to have that edit button available to me. I can come in and make all the changes that I want within this given description section, as well as the rest of the page here. Not the case when it comes to this channels view page. If I wanted to come in and make an edit, let's say to the description field here, all I can do is really hit this suggest change button. well, it looks like this is one that we need to actually complete the setup. But this will still work for now. Basically, I can still come in and make changes to this for this description field. And I can, let's say, tag someone, let's say myself, right? I can even see to say show the difference as I'm reviewing this myself before I submit it. Now, in this case, look, we can't submit this actual for review in this moment, so this is a bad example, but I'll show you how we can fix this as we go to create a workflow in a couple of seconds here. But ideally, what would happen here is I would hit submit for review, and there would be someone that is put in charge that is responsible for reviewing all the changes made to this particular data object. And they would come back in, see the changes that I made, and decide whether or not that should be approved or rejected. So look, the goal of a catalog, right, is very much generally to encourage people to discover what's available to them throughout their environments, right? That's why you're trying to centralize all this, and you're also trying to encourage multiple users to be able to come in and also support the curation of your site. But we know that there's going to be cases where we're not going to be able to, we don't want that to just run wild. We want to actually put some controls in place. As Salvador said, that's the purpose of these workflows. One of those main things we had touched on during our policy segment is the ability to actually manage who can come in and edit those. Now, in the policy page, you saw we were actually able to manage that through the more button, and that was in the policy page. There was actually a line item in here that said access settings. Now that doesn't exist throughout through all objects throughout the site, and so that's where workflows are really going to come into play, even for your policies as well. But so let's show you exactly how to move forward with that. So if you have identified a set of data sources, whether it's a schema or a table, that you wanted to actually put some controls in to manage how updates are being made and put in a peer review process. Coming back to our apps drawer, we're going to go back into our govern section, our govern app. This is again where we had our policies before. Basically, this is actually where some of the stewardship that we had touched about before, you can actually kind of come back to. This is kind of your home base, but you'll see here, this is also where we can come in and build workflows. So at the moment, we have a couple of unpublished ones. We can actually republish those here in a second. But before we do that, what you'll do is, if you're ready to create a new workflow, you'll come up top here and you'll have two options. You'll have the option to add object requests or change requests. Now, when it comes to the add object requests, this is actually only going to apply to the request to add objects for glossary terms. This won't apply for any other object types throughout your Alation site. So this isn't going to apply to tables or reports or any of those types of objects. The add object request is specifically designed for the request of adding a new term to your glossary. For everything else, including glossary terms, but also all your other objects, with the exception of articles, as there's a dedicated process for that, you have the ability to build a workflow to manage change requests. So let's just start there for this moment. So I'm going to basically go through the process of creating a new workflow, and I'm going to kind of duplicate another workflow that I've built out already. Customer file change request. I'm going to give it a name. Once I've given it a name, now I need to kind of help Alation out here by saying, hey, all right, where do we want to enable this workflow on? Let's pick some sources here. So in this case, I'm looking to just have this be managed by for table objects. Once I've picked my object, and you only can do one at a time, unfortunately. So if you wanted to put the same change requests that I'm building out here for another object type, you would have to build out a separate workflow. But once you've picked your object type, the next thing, step 2, is going to be to select either to have this made on all object types, or to start to select exactly which tables you want to apply this to. So in this case, I'm looking for a particular table called customer file. And in this case, I actually have the ability to either include the columns in there that are a part of this table, or exclude it by just simply clicking it by either highlighting or unhighlighting that particular object. in this case, I'll just leave the columns on as is, since I'm also going to be managing those. I want to make sure that's being reviewed before any changes are made. Step 3 is going to be, okay, we found now we know our object type. We know specifically within that object type what objects you want to be managing. Within those objects, what fields do you actually want to manage? So you have the option to simply just select all, and it's going to be any changes that can be made on that page altogether. You're now going to be adding that suggest change workflow, or that suggest change button. Or you can be a little bit more granular here and select, no, I want to be specific with just the title and description, or any of the custom fields that we've built in. We can start to select those and say, nope, I want to be able to manage who can add policies to this page, right? And so once I've done that, the last part here is if I was doing a group of workflows, let's say, or I'm sorry, a group of tables that are all belonging to a particular schema, I can actually say, no, let's not apply this to a particular set of tables within that schema. But in this case, since we're just focusing on one particular table, we can skip this step and just simply hit next. And so that completes the first phase of building out a workflow. We basically have identified what objects we want to apply a suggest change to, and within those objects, specifically which fields. So the second part comes with, and this is where I said in the example we looked at in the channels view, they did not, whoever created that did not finish this process here by adding those reviewers. So you have some options here in terms of who you want to designate as the people responsible for managing any edit requests. First thing is you can either just designate one person, or you can say, hey, as long as one of the following people approve, then that change will be approved. Or you can say, no, I want to do this by committee. So we need at least a certain minimum number of users to approve. So maybe you want to say, hey, just because it goes through one person, that's not enough. I want to make sure the following 2 people, or the following 2 people out of these groups have approved. So once we get 2 yeses, then the change has finally been approved. In this case, I think it's just going to be fine if we just have the one person that we're putting in charge, or having at least one person that's being added to this list approves it. That's good enough for me. So you have the ability to add individual users. So we can add myself. Maybe we'll add Salvador, right? Or if we've actually created groups here, and groups meaning either those default roles that come out of the box with Alation, or if we get into people sets, which is basically going to be anyone that's been added to a particular stewards or experts field on a given object page, Alation will designate those specific people just for those specific pages to be the ones that are allowed to come in and actually update those changes. So people sets can often be confused with groups, or and it feels like there's a lot of overlap there, but basically this allows you to be a little bit more granular. Instead of saying anyone who's a steward can come in and make that approval, no, I want to be specific. I want to say only stewards who have been applied as the steward for a particular object page can actually come in and make those changes. So I just wanted to make that extra clear to everyone. But in this case, I think just adding myself and Salvador is going to be enough. Again, to be clear, if one of the 2 of us come to an object page that has been has a submitted edit request, only one of us has to go in and make that approval. So whichever one gets to it first is going to be good enough. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so you can either basically, this bottom section is just speaking to, you can either say everyone that's been added has to approve, or you can just be more specific on just selecting a certain amount. This last button here down at the bottom is just a little toggle that allows the people who have been designated as responsible for managing those reviews can actually just bypass this process altogether, since they're the ones that are going to be reviewing it anyway. You can actually just toggle that on and just say, hey, if Sean's going to a particular page or Salvador is going to a particular page that they're managing, they don't have to go through this review process. They can just make the change on the fly, on the spot. So it can be a little bit helpful for those users. But for now, just to show you the demonstration purposes, I'm going to leave this off and then click done. And at this point, you have the ability to kind of chain together steps by adding more reviews, but in this case, I think this is fine to just say this workflow ends. Let's go ahead and actually publish this. Got a successful publish message, and now we can see that this workflow has been published. So now when we head to this, let's see if we can go to that page. We're refreshing my customer file page, which a moment ago said edit. But as you can see now, for those fields that we said needed to go through a review process, we can see that we've got that suggest change. Now, if I wanted to come in and actually make an edit, let's say I wanted to make a small change to our description field here. Let's say I wanted to tag another table that has been, right? So right now what I've done is I've just referenced another table that exists and trying to basically with the purpose saying, hey, this is related to this other particular table. Let's go ahead and submit them for review. As I'm making this edit, I can see that, hey, these are the people that are going to have to review your edit. And so if I have any questions, I know who to reach out to, or if they reject it, I also know who to reach out to. But I can go ahead and hit submit for review. I get an update saying my submission has my review has been successfully submitted. Close that out. And now if I'm the reviewer, what I'm going to be able to do is I'll refresh. And if I'm already on the page, you'll see there's actually a little pop-out box here that says, hey, there's something that's being ready for review on this page. But if I'm kind of just on my home page, it takes there's a little bit of lag there. But if I go to my inbox, I can come in there and switch over to tasks, and I can see the list of all change requests that have been made by all of the objects that I'm in charge of reviewing. I can click into it. It'll automatically bring up the edit itself. It's already color coding it for me, saying, hey, here's what's been added. And I either have the ability to simply approve this, or I can hit reject, and I even have the ability to share with that user or that contributor why I have rejected their submission. So this can be a great way. In this case, I'm going to approve it. And now this is actually a live update that now users, when they come to this page, they're going to be able to see the changes that have been made. So relatively pretty straightforward process. Again, the goal here is for particular objects or maybe particular fields within objects, we can control what changes are being made by just having a dedicated person come in and approve or reject those edits being made. But can be a great way to just manage your Alation site as your ingestion of sources as well as curation of sources start to proliferate. This can be a great way to just kind of keep things under control. And so there you go. That's how we got. That's how we manage workflows.
Hey, thank you, Sean. Thank you again. So the last topic on the webinar is a little addition that we've added. There's no demo along with this next area, so we're going to pop right into a very important topic that without this, I think you won't be successful in the long run. So I'm going to share my screen, but we're going to jump into change management. It's something that's close and dear to everybody's heart, I know, but it's needed because if not, you definitely won't be able to get or sustain your Alation, both implementation and your data governance programs as you move forward. So real quick, I'm going to discuss a little bit what change management is and why, a little bit about a method called the EDCAR method, and some additional resources before we get to the Q&A overall for this webinar. So what is change management? Change management is the process, tools, and techniques used to manage the people side of change to achieve the required outcome that the business wants to arrive at. So this is a classical definition, but it's a very important definition to understand because without this component, it will be very difficult to really take the tools, technologies, and methodologies that you introduce into your organization and really make them achievable and tangible. So very quickly, let's look at what change management looks like overall, and look at this schema to give us a good understanding of it. So change management, what it is. So you have to have a reason for change to begin with. And the reason for change is because the current state that you're at does not align well currently with where you want to arrive or achieve. Um, a purpose to achieve in the future. So there's definitely a future state that you want to arrive at. You're currently at a position that you're sort of, your organization is not where it needs to be, and it needs to arrive at a future state. And so that process, that whole process there will hopefully lead to change and lead to success. So there's a couple aspects to this. One, you have a technical side to your change, and then you have a people side. So the technical side is kind of what we've been talking about today. It's we've been talking about Alation. Uh, we've been talking about a little bit about the methodology that supports Alation and active data governance. So it's the design, the development, the delivery of that technology along with the framework. However, there's the people side, and I think the people side may be even more difficult. Um, because an application, you implement it, it's there, but without the people side to the equation, it's not possible to reach that success. So you have to engage with people. They have to adopt and believe in what you're doing, and then they have to use the technology and they use the new frameworks and processes in order to achieve that success. So both the technical and the people side come together, and they add those aspects that equal success. Without that, you won't be able to achieve your success. And change management really is about how you take the people side of the equation and what changes need to be introduced in order for them to use that new technology, to use those new frameworks to achieve that future state. And that's kind of a little bit called the transition state, um, as you move forward in change management. So a little bit about this methodology. So it's classical methodology. You have different phases. You have your prepare phase, your manage your change, your sustain, how you sustain program. It's very common with all methodologies to follow sort of this process. So the first step is obviously the preparations stage. That's where you define what success looks like. You define the impact. You define what approach you're going to use. The second phase is tracking the performance, planning, how you're going to adopt the actions that you intend to adopt. And then the final phase is how you're going to sustain it. So that's where you're going to review performance. That's where your metrics come in. Um, Sustainment comes in, et cetera. You realize the change, and then you continuously improve that change, and the whole circle starts over again. So as part of that framework, we have 5 building blocks for successful change that I'm going to introduce. That's awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. So very quickly, so on each of these, there's obviously they're defined, but they also have some outcomes you want to achieve. So in awareness, um, you want to understand the why around it. So what is the nature of the change? Why is it needed? And what's the risk of not changing? The second one is desire, and that's where you're going to meet that aspect of when you address every individual, they're going to ask themselves a question: what is it in it for me? So what do they have? What are they going to achieve from this? How does it benefit them? So that's when you engage and participate with individuals. The third, knowledge, requires knowing how. So what do they need to know in order to implement the change? So what new training, what new skills, how they understand the change, those are all aspects of that section, that element, I should say. The fourth is ability. So that change requires action in the right direction. It's the demonstrated ability to really implement the change. So are you able to do it? Can you achieve the desired change? Can you adopt the new ways of working? So those outcomes are critical in this stage. The final one is reinforcement, and it goes back to that third step there, and that is, how do you reinforce the change? How do you sustain the change? How do you recognize and make sure that when the changes do occur, how do you reinforce it in terms of with individuals? Giving out awards, et cetera, is an aspect of reinforcement, but also acknowledging the successes as well in this stage, and making sure that if you discover something that's not working, to restart the process and address, excuse me, those areas that are not fully evolving according to the framework and the changes that you're trying to introduce. So incorporating effective change management, you want to do it with a couple of couple of areas of what I call the withs. So with awareness and desire, with knowledge and ability, and with reinforcement. So we've kind of already gone through that in those 5 steps, but you want everyone to understand why the change is necessary. And as part of that, you really want to understand how this change is going to address the business objectives or the future business objectives. So that has to be really mapped out and really understood. You have to people within knowledge and ability. This goes back to that part of the technical component of change management. And people then have to truly understand if you've introduced new technology, how are they going to use that technology to achieve that new business objective? So that's very critical there, and training is going to be a big factor in how that plays. Obviously, the support of those employees as they make that transition is very important. Third is reinforcement. How do you reinforce it? Through highlighting the successes. How do you support employees in that journey in terms of embracing that change, and then rewarding the employees that are able to get to that change, able to achieve the goals of your program. Now, without effective change management, and as we noted, if you introduce a new technology, new methodology, and you don't introduce change management, you're going to get questions. You're going to get questions from employees around why are we doing this. It could lead to lower productivity, could lead to people leaving your organization. Especially, you don't want people leaving your organization that first are contribute to the organization in a very positive way, and especially if they take a lot of knowledge with them. So a lot of inherent knowledge that they may have leaves with an organization if they do leave. Um, Also, lower utilization of the technology that you do introduce. So that part of that sustainability and adoption of a new technology really runs around having the knowledge and the ability, but also obviously the awareness and desire. If those two areas are not met, then the usage of that technology is definitely low, and it leads to low ROI for that technology. And finally, reinforcement. If these new changes that occur in the organization are not reinforced, then the tendency by employees is to revert back to kind of what they did before. Because if you're used to doing something for 5 or 10 years, and you introduce new technology, but there's a lack of reinforcement, a lack of understanding how it's being utilized or not being utilized, then you also will get a failure in terms of your return on investment that you made in this technology or in these new frameworks. So with that said, here's some resources and references that you can use for change management that that'll be part of this slide deck and part of this webinar that we would be able to give to you guys as you move forward in your journey. With that said, we can enter the Q&A phase, and thank you for joining us. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at info@datame.com, or you can contact myself directly or Sean at our emails that we've listed on the slide. And with that said, I want to thank everyone for participating in the webinar, and watch out for new webinars as they come out in the future. Thank you again.